Welcome to this edition of the Masterlete Podcast. I am your host, Wendy Lutter, and I will be interviewing today Judy Mahle Lutter. If the name sounds familiar, it is. She is also my mother and a pioneer in the women's running movement of the 1970s. She also started, based on the need, Melpomene Institute for Women's Health Research. She's a lifelong mover, and at 86 is still moving, still biking, and so we're going to hear her story. So thanks for joining us. Welcome to the Masterlete Podcast. I am Wendy Lutter, and today we are joined by a special Masterlete guest, also my mother, Judy Mahle Lutter. And she was part of the first wave of women runners. She's the founder of Melpomene Institute for Women's Health Research. And at 86, she is all of the things that Masterletes would strive to be. She's still moving every day and biking and has been there since the beginning. So welcome.
Thanks.
So you spent decades being a champion for movement for women. Can you talk through us about how did that all start and what was the beginning? How did you start running?
Well, that's an interesting story. Hap, my husband, your dad, was a runner in high school and college. There were no sports for women. It was possible for people to be cheerleaders. I would never have fit that mold. I would have fallen over, and it was not a good thing. So you guys, you were probably 8 or 9 at most, and your brothers were 4 and 5. And I was in grad school. Dad would come home every day from the hospital, usually pretty late, maybe 7, and he would go for a 20-minute run. And I did not...
After all day long, he'd go run.
I didn't begrudge him that, even though it meant that we had to delay dinner even further, and there were no cell phones, and he wouldn't have used one. So one night... I didn't begrudge him because when he came home, he was so much more relaxed and
After
running and just more anxious to play with you guys, and he just mellowed out. So one night, it was in March, I remember. It was still, pretty wintry. I'd had it with you guys, and maybe I'd had it with Dad, and I said, I'm going for a run, and he didn't snicker, but
you didn't have running shoes.
I dug in my closet. There were no running shoes for women, for heaven's sake. I had little Woolworth Keds. They weren't even tennis shoes, really. Threw on some clothes. I remember that I ran down the front sidewalk and around the corner where there was a curve, and you 3 kids had your noses pressed against the window, and Dad was looking. And I thought,
what was going on?
I can run to the corner. And really, as soon as I got to the corner, I started walking. But I was gone maybe 40 minutes. I probably ran, 2 miles maybe.
On the first time, 2 miles.
Lots of walking.
So your children made you do it. We drove you to run.
Probably. And, when I came back, Dad had you in your pajamas and he was reading a book. And I've said this before, but while not a fast runner at the time, I was a pretty fast learner. So I thought, okay, every night. And that's how it started.
Every single night then you went out?
I don't know. I don't remember. But it became a routine because I knew that I felt better. And Dad was very positive about it. So why not?
What did it feel like to run at a time when so few women were running?
I didn't pay much attention to it, except that the first race I ran, which was St. Patrick's Day.
This would be like late 1970s, right?
You were born in 67. Probably about 76.
Okay.
It was while we were still living on Otis. So there was a St. Patrick's Day race. It was 5 miles at the time. Started at Cretan, went to the Capitol. Dad said, why don't you try it? And so we actually ran the course sometime the week before to see if I could go that far. At the starting line, there were about 100 men. There were 3 runners, 2 of whom were real women runners. And then there were 5 or 6 queen candidates who were there in their jeans and whatever they had in their feet.
Like St. Patrick's Day queens?
Yeah. And so, and the race director said, well, all the women will start at the back. And
okay, then.
Right.
That's how it was.
And then most of these guys were real runners. I mean, they were racers. And the queen candidates dropped out pretty soon, like maybe after a mile. And then they made the slower men, and all 3 women were in the sort of backpack, get on the sidewalk after about Lexington, which was really kind of dangerous because you had to make sure that wasn't a car coming through.
Why did they make you get on the sidewalk?
Because they decided they would open the road again.
Oh, okay.
Because after all.
So you didn't even get the full security.
And I ran close to 7-minute miles, so it wasn't like I was...
Right away, you ran close to 7-minute miles.
I'd been running for a couple of years probably by then.
So how did it feel, the running? Like how did it make you feel?
Strong, more independent. I think I've always loved to move and run, but I didn't have that opportunity, except that I stayed a Girl Scout until I was 17, and the Girl Scouts were kick-ass in terms of camping and, doing things that ordinarily you didn't do. So,
as a girl, you ordinarily didn't do. When along the way, if you can recall, when was it that it stopped being running and it became more of like part of your identity?
Probably day 3. Seriously.
Talk more about that.
Well, I think I'd been missing the opportunity to just be by myself, to do some more thinking. I started out not traditional in terms of college and them wanting me to do graduate work, but traditional in terms of wanting to meet someone in college to marry and expecting to have kids and stay home. And my mom had been a very active professional and married later, but it wasn't until, well, it was pretty early that I just decided that as soon as that I went back to grad school, and then as soon as you kids were big enough, I wanted to be out of the house working.
And so the movement, I remember that your parents both moved, that they swam and golfed. And do you think that played a role for you in seeing sort of how that worked and something that you wanted to make sure you did too?
It's a good question. I don't think that is something I thought about, but now definitely. I mean, my mom was a jock, and she always was. But she didn't have the opportunity, I think, to really do anything until she was regular, till she was in her 50s, and then she started golfing, and she was a crackerjack.
So you also were super naturally talented because you ended up running sub 3-hour marathons and were second in grandmas. So what was that like? Was that something that you trained for? I mean, now we think about, right, you've got your fuel and you talk about what your nutrition is and your rest and recovery. And there wasn't anything like that back then. So how did you know what to do?
I didn't. And I mean, it helped that Dad was a good runner. And it helped in that we ran long miles every weekend. And then the other thing I think you alluded to already is that there was a group, pretty small, of women runners, almost all of them at least 10 years younger than I, but also pre-Title IX, so most of them had not had athletes in college. And they formed a group. I was not a founder, but very active early on, called Northern Lights Running Club, maybe even Racing Club at first. And I think we met once a month or maybe once every 2 months. We had speakers. But that group began racing. And I think that group also was probably instrumental in getting Bonnie Bell to come here, which was a women's race. some of them remain my best friends. And so we would plan, usually with just one or two other people, to meet up during the week. So mostly I ran by myself, but after that group, I probably ran with Justine once a week and, some people like that. And then a running group formed that you know about because we would bring back donuts from our Sunday run, again, of women and men who were 10, 15 years younger.
How the community piece seems like that was really important. Talk about that a little bit.
It was just fun to have other women who understood why it was so important, to have other women who said, gee, I'll go for a run with you.
Even though it was kind of weird at that point and not very many people were doing it, to have camaraderie.
I remember running to the U, to a class one late afternoon, and it was winter, and there weren't running clothes either that were worth anything. I probably had on a sweatshirt and a stocking cap, and some guy yelled out his car window, "Are you a girl?" and I just think there weren't many of us, but I guess, I don't know how I look like a girl, but anyway. And I was proud to say yes,
So what did you feel like obviously there's physical benefits, but how about the emotional part or something else that running did for you?
Well, it's trite, but I do think it changed my life, or it changed the trajectory, because up to that point, and Dad was always a feminist, but I didn't have a self-identity. I was your mom. I was Dad's husband, and especially
Dad's wife.
Yeah, thank you. But in orthopedics, a very male-dominated subspecialty. You were never the doctor's wife, so to speak. Right.
So
that's right. And I went because it was important to Dad, but he also knew that I didn't like it very much. And so the other interesting thing about sort of being a pioneer, one of the first, is it was pretty easy to win my age division. And so, the name would be in the paper teeny tiny, but that's when people started asking me questions about menstruation and led to Melpomene. And again, it was just like, oh, I'm a person too, which I had felt like until getting married.
So that leads into Melpomene. So you started Melpomene Institute for Women's Health Research. Talk about that. Tell us what it is, and also why you started it. And you started it with another woman runner friend.
Right. Although, okay, so to back up a little bit, I was a researcher at the U by that point. I think I had both my master's degrees, but I might have been, yeah, I did. And so some people, very few, like 6 maybe, who I did not know over a period of time, put that together. They knew I was doing research at the U, it was research on women. They knew I was a runner, and I got inquiries about changed menstrual cycle. These were
from runners of like,
from
what's
runners.
happening? Why
Right.
is this happening to
Right.
me? Do you know what's going on?
Exactly. And some of these people had been regular menstruators all their life. I was not, and I'd never noticed a real change connected with running. But I was curious, and I had resources. I had Dad, who had some of the medical contacts. I had my team at the university. The co-founder, Susan, was an OBGYN resident at the time. She was a critical factor in encouraging me to consider actually doing something with it and making it a nonprofit. But the other person, who's the first person you ever ran with, Pat Wiesner, who was athletic director at MAC, was really the other big force in saying we can do this. And she got me a bit of grant money through McAllister, and was just...
So there was lots of encouragement from people to say, this might be something, go ahead and try to do some research on here and turn it into a formal nonprofit.
Right. And, we started in our attic, but within the first 6 months, it was so impressive and touching to me, really, that some of the leaders in the field who didn't know shit about me or the organization saw there might be a need for it. And so our advisory board had really famous people almost from the beginning.
So I remember a story that you did a survey, and then the back page, there was only like one question on the back page, and that these women wrote tons and tons of questions about that. That also, is that right? It also led to some of your research?
Absolutely. That was before we were even a nonprofit. We kind of just did stuff for maybe 2 years before we incorporated or whatever you do. And yes, the questionnaire was about menstruation, and it didn't all fit.
With movement, like,
right.
well, yeah.
Right. And it was directed toward runners, and I think we used the Northern Lights Running Club to distribute, and I think we also had it printed a couple places in newsletters. And we, part of my training had been writing questionnaires as a researcher. And I tried to squeeze it all in an 8 by 10 pages as well before you did anything on a computer. And there was one question we still needed to ask, and it was on the back of the page. And yes, practically everybody filled it out. There were questions about pregnancy, a lot of questions about running or swimming or walking while pregnant. So that was one of our first studies.
So there just weren't people doing research on this, on women?
If they were, it was on elites.
Okay.
And we made a big point early on that we wanted to study people who were not elite. Sure, if we had definitely Melpomene members who were elite in their field, but that wasn't our focus.
What did you learn? What were some of the key findings about running while pregnant?
It's funny because occasionally something will come out in the paper that is what we did 40 years ago and say,
wow,
gee, you really can run while pregnant. It's like, really? But it was a pretty big study, and we also, at the time, I don't know, a couple hundred people. And, we were able to recruit because one year at the Boston Marathon, I was allowed to bring questionnaires.
To the people running?
To women running Boston.
Oh, that's cool.
And we got a very big, again, numbers running Boston were women running Boston numbers were small. And I should look this up, but I think we got 221 questionnaires back from that much more diverse, still very white, very well educated, but a broader geographic sample. So our pregnancy study didn't just involve Minnesotans. And we kept track. People had to enroll in their first trimester, and we followed what they did, what they ate. We had a nutritionist on the advisory board. And then we followed the kids for about 4 or 5 years.
Oh, my gosh. So it was a longevity study as well. And do you remember from that study what a key takeaway was, other than, yes, you can and should keep moving and be active?
I just think that for a lot of women, they were scared and they did want to run. And of interest, one of the women in our study had qualified for the Olympic trials, and her husband was an exercise.
And she was pregnant.
Yeah, and she would be 7 months pregnant for the trials.
Oh, wow.
And there were only 99 people or something, women who qualified that year. Her husband was an exercise physiologist. Her doctor was on board. She ran the marathon, the Olympic trial. She was not, she knew she wouldn't qualify for the team, but I think she was making a statement, a very good statement. But the race officials made her stop and take her number off, I think at mile 22, because that was the cutoff. And then they had an ambulance following her in case she got in trouble. And she had mixed emotions. She said, I didn't need an ambulance. As an accomplished athlete, I would have dropped out if I knew I was overheating. I think her husband was following her very closely. But she said that the people on the ambulance were very sweet. That they were cheering her on.
Yeah. So you mentioned a little bit, but that you had some really well-known people as part of Melpomene. Benoit Samuelson became a big supporter of Melpomene, and she really was the symbol of women's endurance early on. Talk about how she got involved.
Well, I'm going to go back just a second because I'm sure you remember we had the TV in the basement, and when she ran the Olympic marathon, we were watching her.
Yeah, I remember. It was an amazing experience. And my connection later on was that she came back and was here incognito to test out if she could still run. And my first marathon, I ran the first mile with Joan and Benoit Samuelson because she was like, "Come on, girls, come with me."
I know,
which was a really bad
idea.
Way it was cool, but then of course dying after that and not being able to keep up sub 7. But I just remember her as like the most personable, wonderful person, and I've always found it fascinating that she just she really liked what Melpomene was doing. And how did she find you?
Well, I had developed a friend, an acquaintance first, who was a writer. And some people were writing about Melpomene even on the national level because we were doing interesting things. And so then she went to Nike, and Nike had these fabulous conferences, mostly for women from the magazines Many Don't Exist, Shape and Fit, and women, athletic magazines kind of for women, and Runner's World. And so Nike would fly maybe 25 writers in, and it was partially a Nike trying to promote a still young women's line of
the
clothes and shoes primarily. And so and I was an invited speaker a couple times, which was super fun. And there was one at some posh place in Arizona, and Joni was one of the speakers. And there were 2 or 3 of us who were not writers, but that wasn't our purpose. And so we were dying because they wouldn't serve us anything. The food was just minuscule portions because it was really kind
for
of
the athletes
spa. And Joni's husband Scott is about 6'5", and they had just had Abby, the first baby, so the 3 of them were there. And Joni also eats very well. And
so you guys met over wanting food, wanting real nutrition.
Yep. And then maybe she was, I can't remember if she had Abby or was just pregnant, but she then, when she was pregnant, maybe with her second kid, she just was in contact with us, not for advice really, but just kind of reporting what was going on. And she received some of the same nonsense that, she shouldn't be running. And I think she ran pretty much up to her 9th month. And the other thing that some of these women reported to us was how they were able to keep running. That they wore a bathing suit or something, to just sort of make it easier.
Because there weren't all the special athletic bras and gear back then, for sure. So Billie Jean King, I also know, was a big supporter of Melpomene, and she's long been a champion for equity. Tell that story of how she got involved with Melpomene.
Somehow the Women's Sports Foundation was maybe 2 or 3 older than Melpomene, and it still exists and is a pretty significant factor in equity and other things for women. And one of the women I met and got to know was Eva Auchincloss, a San Franciscoan, and she knew Billie Jean well. And she said, I think we were only about 3 years old as an institution, if that. She said, Billie Jean should come and speak for you. And I kind of laughed and said, that'd be great, Eva. And then Eva was hosting something at her house in San Francisco, I believe, for the Women's Sports Foundation. And she said, I'm going to make sure Billie Jean talks to you from this event. So she put Billie Jean on the phone. And
that was it. Then she came and spoke a couple times for Melpomene, and
she was here 3 times. And the first time we were still in the attic, so we got a couple of nasty phone calls because she had recently been outed as a lesbian. and
Phone calls of people not wanting her to be there for Melpomene.
Mm-hmm.
What? And this was like 1980, 80-ish, something. I think it was because I was still in high school and I remember coming.
Well, and she gave a press conference at Four Paws, and you guys were all there, and Reed interviewed her. And Reed was like, I don't know, 8? I don't know. Anyway, and she was so sweet. She did not talk down to him. And then the other thing, she turfed all questions about her sexuality, saying, I'm here for Melpomene. We're talking about that. And afterwards she said, she gave me such good advice many times. She said, you need to have a big banner that says Melpomene behind my head. She said, she just was so savvy. And that time we paid her $5,000.
Yeah, we need a Masterlete one right here. That's good advice from Billie Jean from Judy.
We funded the $5,000 that was her honorarium, which was ridiculously low at the time, by inviting 10 people for $500 each for lunch with her. And that time she took it and took us all out for dinner afterward, and nobody recognized her until she paid the check. And
they said they
so
saw
the waiter about passed out.
So the people I remember would come up and thank you, women, because you were answering questions about movement and physical activity. And you were definitely one of the early adopters of that. So talk a little bit about when it was that you stopped running, and how did you change what you were doing for movement so you could still move?
It was hard. It was really hard. And Dad had more orthopedic injuries than I, and so we cut back some. I think we were both really pushed ourselves to run the 100th Boston Marathon, particularly because you had to qualify. Although when I was first running, qualifying times for women were 3:10. At that point, as a 57-year-old, my qualifying time was 3:40, but that was hard. So I think we just both cut back. I stopped later than he did, but at a certain point, it wasn't injuries. I was once I had a stress fracture and had to drop out of a marathon, but otherwise I was very injury-free. And again, you talk about, I didn't have anyone telling me how much to run. We ran way too long. We ran
no
put in
recovery.
a lot too many miles. We did all kinds of stupid things, and luckily didn't get injured badly. But it was really hard to give it up. But I was just getting so slow that I wasn't having fun. And my main reason to this day to be on my bike so much is it's fun. It's not because there's a particular goal in mind. Back then there was a goal to finish a marathon, and for some of them to finish sub 3, but
if it's not fun, it's not worth it. If it's just work, the workout part versus the exercise and the movement and all the things that gives you. So you just turned 86, and you are about to bike your what number mile for this year?
4,500.
So that is, most people half your age don't do half that much. So talk about what's movement like for you today?
Essential. I think that one of the hardest moments since your dad died, which was the hardest, just in terms of me trying to, and starting to use biking as a way, and swimming. I've always swum a lot, as a way to just deal with my grief sometimes and move on. But we had done triathlons, and so biking was a way to, be out there and move. And it means I meet younger people.
You get to see lots of the city, beautiful days, changing weather.
Right.
So how you're not on your racing bike anymore? right? So how have you adapted like different
Oh, I am.
bikes to on your road bike, racing bike? Okay, never mind. You don't wear clip-ons anymore.
I don't wear clip-ons anymore.
But
And just a quick backup, I realized how essential it is when a year ago I just skidded on a piece of gravel, and because if I had fallen, it would have been okay, but I wasn't with clip-ons, and it didn't clip off, and I shattered my ankle.
that was a very very bad injury.
And they thought I might lose my foot for a while, for half an hour. But you guys, I so appreciate. I mean, you were very kind, but you also didn't say, "Mom, that's it." And as a matter of fact, you and I talked to the surgeon going into surgery.
I did, and I said, you better fix this leg so that she can bike again, because nobody's going to be able to live with her if she can't. So this is not going to be a pretty situation. And then you became a poster child for him of what happens, and that at 85 you can have a major injury with your bone sticking out and then go back the next year and ride 4,500 miles. So
And do a triathlon. I did get in touch with him after that.
So you did talk about that. You went back and did a triathlon this summer. How was that?
Super, super fun. Yeah, that was. So I have two friends who were neighbors. They're now 30 and 31. And the year before that, so the injury was 2024. In 2023, we had talked about doing a triathlon together where I would be the biker, Eli would swim, and Angela would run. And obviously that didn't happen in 2024 because I was 5 months kind of without walking. But early this year, we said, okay, and we found one. And Eli swam super fast. I biked faster than I believe possible. And Angela ran, and we didn't care. We just wanted to finish and
have fun. Go back to that having
so
fun.
Great to be with these kids.
So do you think you were the oldest one there?
I have no idea. And I think that from a marketing standpoint, which both you and I mean, I had to do it for Melpomene. Marketing and fundraising were things I had to learn. I think the race director who was bemoaning the fact that there were far fewer participants, the Turtle Man, than they'd had certainly when Dad and I did it. And I think there was a story of, me potentially being the oldest doing it with these young kids, not because I needed publicity, but I just thought, this is a way to
show people
broaden
that they
your
can
audience.
and show people that they can still do it, and that you don't have to you don't have to stop. What do you say to people when they say, "Why are you still doing this?" or "How can you do this? You're so old." Besides the swear words, let's keep those out of here because I know that happens. But that's why it's giving them the middle finger. What do you do?
Yeah. If it's a conversation and not just a snotty remark, I say, it's because it helps me live a vibrant life. It's because without it, I was crabbier when I couldn't walk.
Yes.
And
I remember growing up that you would be crabby if you didn't run. And that's the same for me too, of like, okay, get out. Your mom hasn't run yet. Go run and then come back and we'll talk. So the you in comparison, we're talking a lot about this concept of health span, and that it's all about the not the number of years that you have, but how good you live those years that you have. And it seems like you, compared to a lot of your peers, you're still doing things that people 10, 15 years younger than you are. Do you think that has something to do with the fact that you've been moving for your whole life?
Yeah. I suspect, and yet many of my friends work out. They go to a gym, do stationary rowing, do Pilates, do a lot of things. And it's been interesting that the person I travel with actually, who's 6 years younger, was a synchronized swimmer which is one of the first things available to women. And Grandma was a synchronized swimmer at McAllister.
That was a few things you could do as a woman.
Right, exactly. And I blew it off kind of as a sport, but it's damn hard.
Yeah, I would not do well. It's the synchronized swimming. So, but the fact that you just keep moving, and even, I mean, you fall down and you get up. Yeah, you fall down a lot, but you never. I think some of that is that you've moved and you've weightlifted and you've done all these things for so many years that it's the muscle memory, it seems, that really helps you to just keep going.
And I'm pretty determined. I was determined to get back on my bike after the big accident. I think I do have a drive to be out there, and the triathlon was just so much fun because the competition the last time I competed was 30 years ago. But I did like it.
Not 30 years ago. A while.
Yeah. 57 was when we did the last Boston, so that's 29.
But you've still got that. You compete with yourself, so that's part of it.
Yeah,
that
absolutely
definitely keeps you out there.
Absolutely.
So what is your message to older adults who want to move but they don't know where to start?
I think probably trying different things. I think if you have younger friends or a daughter or a son, walking has never been something that does it much for me, but I think that's probably a way to start. I'm kind of doing more exploring because my body doesn't really like to walk with the neuropathy. So again, looking at gyms, which for me haven't fit much in the past, but most of my friends go to a gym, and there's a social aspect to that. And
so just trying some of these, encouraging people to try different things.
Exactly. And I think there are really good places around who are encouraging older people. I don't know. I should have asked my friends recently, what the gym looks like, how many people, because most of these people are in their 70s.
Yeah. I think there's a lot that it's really wonderful to see, depending on the club or the community center, that there really is this embracing of all different ages, which I think is a change from maybe 20 years ago. So what myths about aging and movement do you wish that we could retire?
I think older men have it easier because men have traditionally had opportunities to be, an athlete. So I don't care what people think in terms of that I shouldn't be doing something. But I think for a lot of people, for a lot of women, that's a barrier.
Of what other people think. And so maybe I shouldn't try this. Maybe I shouldn't still keep riding my bike if I'm 80 because whatever.
So I have a lot of 70-year-old friends, and there's a big difference between 70 and 86.
Yeah.
Both physically and how you look and how people treat you. And almost all of them are physically active. One of them who has done triathlons, the whole thing, Connie, at age 73. And so I think as more and more older women are out there, it just becomes more comfortable.
Where you can see people who look like you, or you could see that as a role model and say, oh my gosh, okay, I can do that. Wow, look at her.
And I also have to be kind of careful, I think, with some of my contemporaries who just don't understand. So they don't judge, but I wouldn't talk to them about how excited I was about the triathlon much or how many miles I've biked. I mean, that's me and that's for me, but it doesn't bother them, but I don't think they just
don't get it if they're not out there. Yeah, that's one of the things that we've talked about is how do you find people who are doing things like you're doing, who are also interested and excited about it, but it might not be the people that you work with or that you see. They think you're kind of weird because you're like, oh, I have to get home and I got to get that bike ride in. How do you think that families can support their older people in their life in terms of movement?
Well, you kids certainly have. I mean, especially after the injury, there was, none of you said, maybe you talked to each other, but, said she should sit down because you knew that wasn't. But I think from the time I started running and even before with Dad being a regular runner, you remember we went to Boston. You went to Boston almost every time you went.
I do remember. That was our spring break. That was Boston Marathon time. I didn't know people could have spring breaks, actually.
Yeah, we did deprive you on several occasions. But I just feel as if our family has always liked to move in different ways. That, Reed is a really accomplished cross-country skier, Park is a diver and tennis player, you as a marathoner and just good at lots of things. Not so sure about golf yet, right? But that was kind of how we saw ourselves, and also the kind of travel that we did was not with a group. I mean, we were adjusting to, in Tunisia, a very different society, and I didn't run in Tunisia for a couple of years because it was not something people did, and then I did.
What do you hope that younger generations can learn from you and your journey with being physically active?
Some of my younger friends, and I have a lot, do occasionally say, we want to be like you when we grow up. and most of them are they're all physically active. And so that makes me feel really good. And that they see that in many ways I think I'm younger emotionally because I'm doing what I'm doing.
And you're out there and you're a role model and they can see that it's possible. Well, thank you so much for talking to us and for showing us that you can still have a great time and fun and love being out there at 86.